Canon has been making big leaps in the wildlife photography world. Just over a week ago, Canon announced their newest affordable wildlife photography camera that is, in my opinion, still a great semi-professional or even possibly professional grade camera. I'll be talking about what's good about it, what's not so good about it, as well as talking about who this camera is made for specifically and if it's right for you. In my opinion, Canon has been doing a couple things right for a while now. Firstly, for people who rely on autofocus, Canon historically has been one of the better brands, but recently with their new eye detection AF on their newest mirrorless bodies, we've only seen this level up. With the Canon R7, Canon is claiming that it will inherit the autofocus system from the Canon R3, which has been widely raved about, so we should be able to expect a pretty high quality from the Canon R7 autofocus. One of the biggest differences about the Canon R7 is its APS-C mount. As opposed to other top-tier full-frame camera bodies that Canon has been releasing on their mirrorless lineup over the past few years, this one has a crop sensor, meaning a couple of different things. Firstly, the Canon R7 gets a lot more reach with the same exact lenses. For example, with the crop factor of 1.6 on APS-C, you'll find the Canon R7 getting much closer to subjects than a full-frame can comparatively. Amazingly, the cool thing about this is that even though the Canon R7 has a megapixel count of 32, as opposed to something like the Canon R5, for example, with 45 megapixels, if the Canon R5 tries to crop into the same focal length in the same exact variables as the R7 keeps a higher megapixel count. So if you're trying to get much closer to birds or other wildlife, the R7 might actually be a fantastic option for you. Having an APS-C crop sensor does come with some downsides though. For one, just because your megapixel count is higher doesn't mean that your depth of field appearance is greater. So for those coveting blurred backgrounds in wildlife photography, you won't be at a much better setup with the R7. Also, while we haven't gotten to see much of its low-light capabilities yet, being an APS-C, it is bound to be a little bit worse in handling noise than other full-frame cameras. And through other wildlife photography reviews that I've listened to and seen, it's recommended to stick to 3200 ISO or 6400 ISO on the high end. One thing that the Canon R7 does offer, which is extremely exciting, however, is 15 frames per second mechanical shutter burst modes. Compared to other mirrorless camera bodies currently, that is pretty solid. But if you consider the price point, the Canon R7 will get you leagues better than anything else in its budget range. These burst modes can be super helpful as a wildlife photographer to capture action or other intimate moments you might miss otherwise. So if you're looking to pre-order the Canon R7, it's important to go with a company who is going to do everything they can to get it into your hands as quickly as possible, and to go with a company that values customer service and doesn't just mark you as another number. With the Nikon Z9 craze that was happening a while ago and still is kind of happening, people were getting lost in these big company systems and waiting for months and months for their cameras, and some people have been waiting even up until today. On a recent podcast I had with Jamin Hunter-Taylor, Jamin talked about his experience and how Hunt's photo and video helped him get the Z9 as quick as possible and had some fantastic and attentive customer service to help him out along the way. Which is why I'm representing Hunt's Photo and Video here today as the sponsor of this episode if you're interested in purchasing the R7. For those of you wanting to get the R7 as soon as possible in the pre-order with some quality customer service still, check out my link in the description below to make the purchase. I've loved my experience working with Hunt's Photo and Video, and they've always done a great job with me personally communicating about the products that I'm receiving from them. Lastly, I just wanted to compare the R7 according to the price and talk about who this camera is really built for. What's its audience? At the price point, honestly, it's a steal. If you're looking to upgrade your gear to a mid-level range camera because you're on a lower tier system, this is about the best you are going to find out there before you start to spend thousands of dollars more. Just compare the R7 as it comes in at $1,500 compared to the R5 that comes in at $4,000. Less than half of the cost, and it can do almost just as much as it in many ways, and even more in others. For those of you looking to ball on a budget, it's honestly the most cost-effective option I've seen presented in the camera world in a couple years now. And secondly, while the Canon R7 may not be quite as good as the R5 or R3 in some other ways, if you're looking to capture incredibly close-up portraits of birds and other wildlife, this may actually be a better option for you. With its APS-C crop factor resulting in higher resolutions at distant focal lengths, the R7 is formidable when shooting at length and distance, and the best mirrorless APS-C reach camera out there currently, straight up. If you aren't a heavily portrait wildlife photographer, however, and you aren't necessarily balling on a budget, this camera may not be the right fit for you, but if you are, this camera may be exactly what you are looking for. I hope that this video was helpful to you in summarizing what the R7's strengths are. Remember to check out my link to the Canon R7 at Hunt's Photo and Video in the description below if you're interested in pre-ordering the Canon R7. And if you want to see other Canon cameras and how they compare, click this video here in the end screen, and I'll see you guys next time.